Hey, Toothers, it's me. It's been probably a month, I think. I think I did something last month at some point, but February was not fun. Actually, January was great either, but I don't want to talk too much about politics today. I started avoiding a lot of the news stuff right after the inauguration, and I feel a little better. I mean, I still kept up with some of the news, just taken away from it, and it's pretty grim. It's pretty grim. So I don't necessarily need to document it for people. I think we're all watching it in real time. But if you're if you're missing the news, you don't see what's going on. It's take 5 minutes, take a dive, and then start drinking heavily. I don't have any other advice right now. And for those of you who know me, which is all of you, this will not be news, but for those of you who want to hear the ramblings of a fat man who is very inconsistent with his postings, then you will not be aware that I had an unplanned surgery last month. February, right? No, it was January. I do a recording it all in February? Should probably check that out. I'm still recovering. Several weeks later, I'm still recovering. And that's all from being diabetic and making poor life choices and having to have a part of my body cut open so they can drain the gross out of me. And well, I'm still gross. I get to live in diapers right now. It's very exciting. That's for the blood, not for anything else. So it's been a whirlwind. It's been a whirlwind of pain and terror the last few weeks. And work is work, but some things take longer than they need to, and other projects in place, and just it's constant. I mean, I should be working right now, but I'm picking up my child. I will have to work well into the night tonight to get some things hopefully caught up. So we'll see how that goes. But I did want to talk about a couple things that I've been getting back into. Right, it's with the utter fear and terror, right, of the now current administration, being in power, the laughing stock of cabinet members and just our place in the world. I think people are bemused and angered and scared. They're definitely not looked favorably upon. I can't imagine by anybody at this point, except maybe the far right-wing people. And say Germany, right? The AfD are probably super excited that the far right-wing have a country. They wish that they had taken over their country. We failed, thankfully, unfortunately. Our people were not as collectively worried about that. So, anyway, to try to cleanse my palate of that, of the absurdity of reality, I've gone back to my interests in physics, in religious history, and I mean neuroscience to some extent, but yeah, neuroscience, right? So I've started watching a bunch of documentaries, watching stuff on the Nazis and their occult interests, and I mean, I knew that they had them. I forgot that Himmler was so book nerdish about myths and the whole Teutonic nonsense that was created, and they found like a single book that claimed certain things, and they had to have a copy of this book. They had to have the original writing. No, it was probably nonsense. I don't mean from my perspective. I mean in general, it's probably nonsense. Just the depths to which people will go to validate their hatred is compelling to me. I mean, in this country, we just have it now, and now that our president is our president again, it's just okay to hate, apparently, because he does. So, I don't need any other justification for it. I mean, there are people that still bend over backwards trying to make Scripture fit their distaste for other people. And hate is a pervasive, obnoxious thing that's just going to continue, which is really unfortunate. But it seems that maybe on some level, at least here in the U.S., we're just being honest. We just want to hate. We don't have a reason. We just want to hate. Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. Illegals are taking their jobs. Anyway, so who was I talking about? Yeah. Nazis. And then, so what I watched recently was a couple of episodes of Nova and about the brain. So there are a couple of things that are of interest, right? As far as the brain goes, and it is kind of this idea of identity, this idea of agency, this idea of who is pulling the strings, right? And the thing of it is, oh my God, there are dudes just in the road putting their hands up to stop traffic. I almost hit another fat man. That would have been harmful to my vehicle. He would have been fine, but I mean, he would have been dead. Yeah, he would have been. He would have been horrendously dead. Picking up sticks or covering up potholes. A big pothole. A big pothole. Yeah. So who is who, right? Who are you? Who am I? What makes us who we are? And I want to say most people, this isn't a question. This is not something that they struggle with, or they think about, or largely speaking, care about. I have been fascinated about this for a while. I think a lot of it comes from just the whole free will thing that I toy with, that I talk about, and the prevailing. I mean, the rising, concept in neuroscience and this kind of higher level of like brain surgery, neuroscience stuff, is that we are not in charge, right? We don't have. All right, so let's back up. So free will. So to catch us up kind of quickly on free will, my understanding or my kind of definition, the thing that I think about when I think about free will, is largely the religious concept of free will, the specifically westernized, Pentecostal, evangelical, largely Christian ideology that God gave us free will. God did not want us to be puppets. Right? Hell, if you've seen the movie Dogma, if you haven't, you should. But if you have, the part of the complaint by the angels in that movie is that they had to bow constantly, bow in supplication. They had to worship and do his bidding, and humanity. He gave choice, gave us the choice to believe or not to believe. I mean, in a much longer discussion, I also kind of treat that as especially the way it is now, not really as a choice, but as a hostage situation. Believe or die. Believe or go to hell. Do what I say, I'm murder you. And when you die, you're going to be murdered forever. Torment and pain. Yeah, it's not much of a decision when you get right down to it. I mean, the Bible itself starts out with loyalty. It ain't about belief, it's about loyalty, like a mob boss. Anyway, free will is this idea that we're allowed to make choices, that there isn't some plan. There isn't. I mean, there's knowledge, and maybe there's a plan, right, as far as your data goes. But we have the opportunity to mess that up, to make decisions that are going to point us in a direction that may not have been intended by the Almighty, and yet the Almighty already knows. And I don't know. That's a different discussion. So the problem with that, right, the increasing problem with that is because as we learn more about the brain, we begin to really understand that different parts of the brain do different things, right? And when we think about something, when we say something, when we want to move an object, right, these are all different parts of the brain that are doing it, which I think we all collectively appreciate and understand. However, when you drill down a little further, or let's talk about split brain, right? So, split brain is this idea where people would have seizures, and they noticed that it would go from one side of the brain to the other side of the brain, right? It would spread in the brain, and what these earlier like brain surgeons would do is they figured out that there was this connective tissue in between the hemispheres of the brain called the corpus callosum, that would allow both sides of the brain to communicate. So they realized that if they were to separate those things, the seizures wouldn't spread. And fundamentally, this procedure was performed on highly epileptic patients. But what they discovered after the fact was not only did their predilection towards seizures reduce significantly. I don't remember if they went away completely, but they definitely reduced significantly. I don't remember if they covered that in that video, but they did in the book that I read a while ago. They realized that they weren't responding to things quite the same way. And the more examples of this that they had, the more studies in this that they did, the more it became apparent that, I think that they knew there was going to be some, potential complications, but they're trying to prevent seizures. And what's fascinating about it is really getting that example of how one side of the brain operates more of the other side of the body, right? So they were showing videos of this, and they're doing studies. And as an example, they had the person who was hosting the video, and I read about this separately, but the person hosting the video goes into this little room, and she's got her two hands are in this box, and they're both given a marker, and they're both given a pad of paper, and they flash an image on the screen, and there's a left image and a right image. And what she was supposed to do was she was supposed to draw both images at the same time with both of her hands. She could see, the images. Like it wasn't, and they weren't difficult images. Right? One was 3 lines that connected it like a, where the up and down line, the vertical line was on the right side of, say, a box. Right? So you got a line at the top, line at the bottom, line on the right. And on the right side, it was like a U. The same thing, right? 2 horizontal and, 2 vertical, and then the 1 horizontal line connecting them on the bottom. And as you start to draw them, your brain is kind of fighting, trying to decide which one to actually draw. Well, in people with this corpus callosum missing, with a split brain surgery, they did not have this problem. Their hands were free to operate and to draw the thing that they saw, and to react differently than the other hand. They would also see times where they would try to solve these little puzzles, and the hands would fight each other, because one side of the brain thought it was doing the right thing, and the other side of the brain thought it was doing the right thing, and they were doing different things because the different parts of the brain process it differently. Really surreal looking stuff. They showed another video of a guy who they showed him quickly the word Texas, and they wanted him to say the word that he saw, but they showed it to the side of his brain that didn't control speech, and he couldn't respond. He couldn't even say he didn't see anything. He just kind of sat there and stared. Which they prodded him, did you see anything? I didn't see anything. And then if they did it to the other side, right, he could. And then they did a similar thing to the other side of his brain, and he could draw. He had to draw something, and he was able to draw it out, but he didn't understand, like, consciously what it was that he had drawn, or why he had drawn it, right? So there's this whole gap in how they're able to process information, because the brain's not working collectively anymore. And that sparks a pretty basic question, because with split brain where one side of your brain is trying to do something and the other side of your brain is trying to do something else. Well, who is that? Right? Who is in charge? And they're still trying to. I mean, look. So on a generic level, just separately, they're also trying to understand how like consciousness works, or if consciousness is technically a thing. So there's still stuff being done to that. But this research specifically is wildly fascinating to me. It has been for years. And I think it's only been going on since the 50s or 60s. I mean, it's a new thing that we're just beginning to really understand. But there's a lot of people working on it. There's a lot of ways to understand that, and not for nothing, right? There are these tricks that some people learn, right? You talk about cold reads, right? People are semi-predictable. You can get some of that insight. I don't think it's the same exact level as like that show Lie to Me, which I loved actually. I wish that show had kept going. With the micro expressions, but and the premise of that show was this guy could read micro expressions, and he was like a human lie detector. There were pretty obvious signs of reactions that people would give that would kind of give away their feeling about a question or a subject or a topic or something that they said, or how they immediately reacted to a thing before being able to catch themselves. Oh, and that's the other thing, and I think I've talked about this one already, right? The studies of brain activity. You ask somebody a question. I did not mean to say that. You ask somebody a question, and part of their brain fires before they respond. Like it's the timing is like milliseconds. But the whole point is you are not aware of your answer until after the part of your brain has already processed it and decided what the answer is, how you're going to respond. And then you respond, and then it's a timing thing. It's super quick, but it is a timing issue. Even now, the thing that's funny about these ramblings, I'm not purposefully writing anything down. These aren't scripts. This is just me rambling about the things that I think about, the things that I'm interested in, the things that I watch, the things that I'm learning. There's no planning in this. Like I have a couple blog posts that are planned that I have to work on, but work is work, and it needs to get me sucked into a game that I gotta take a step away from so I can finish some things. But and the kids were off last week for school vacation, so I had my boy for a couple of days. I mean, not necessarily through the week, but he bookended the week, so I wanted to make sure that he was not totally bored. But I'm not. And even those side steps, or even those rambling. I mean, who plans out the things that they're going to say exclusively, extensively? The other thing that was a lot of mumbling. Other thing about it, which I may have just lost, but yeah, is how we react to. Oh yeah. So, we are. So this is where we kind of get into. The question of who's in charge, right? I was actually telling my son about the old idea of the homunculus. There was a little dude in our brains running the show, pulling the strings, right? Like Men in Black, that tiny little alien in that giant dude. It's like that. That was a real belief for a little while. So we know it's not that, but there's still this question of. So one of the things that has come up with some of the people that I've started this journey with is that free will isn't a thing because we're not consciously making decisions. Our brains are making decisions. Now, the extension of that idea for them is that means it's difficult, if not impossible, to hold people responsible for their decisions because they're not doing it on purpose. And there was a guy, I forget, was this the 50s? There's a guy who did experience an accident and did have some brain damage, and he did go to a school and the old book tower kind of thing, and he did shoot people. And I think he left behind a note or a book detailing the fact that he felt like he was losing his mind, and he didn't want to go and kill people, but he was going to.
Hey, it's just editing me. I wanted to clarify that the person I was talking about, his name was Charles Whitman. And in August of 1966, he went on a rampage, basically, and 17 people died. 31 people were wounded. And what they found in the autopsy was he had a tumor inside of his brain. And there was a commission put together to kind of review the findings and everything. And what's interesting about this is, I'm going to read this. I'm reading it from Wikipedia, so take what you will out of it. But so let's see. Psychiatric contributors to the report concluded that the relationship between the brain tumor and Whitman's actions cannot be established with clarity. However, the tumor conceivably could have contributed to his inability to control his emotions and actions. The neurologists and neuropathologists were more circumspect, concluding that the application of existing knowledge of organic brain function does not enable us to explain the actions of Whitman on August 1st. Let's see. Yeah, so, he did leave a suicide note, actually. Let's see, what did he say? I don't quite understand what it is that compels me to type this letter. Perhaps it is to leave some vague reason for the actions I have recently performed. I don't really understand myself these days. I am supposed to be an average, reasonable, and intelligent young man. However, lately, I cannot recall when it started, I have been a victim of many unusual and irrational thoughts. These thoughts constantly recur, and it requires a tremendous mental effort to concentrate on useful and progressive tasks. So those are the things that I was referring to. He was a Marine, actually, which I don't remember if I mentioned or not, but I think I forgot what military branch he was part of. But just wanted to provide some clarification, as per usual.
And we see examples of this, just people getting hurt. One of the stories that they told more specifically was, and I guess famously, this guy was working on a railway back in the 1800s. What's 1800s? And he was trying to stuff some hole that had TNT in it, that had gunpowder in it, and the metal bar he was using hit the metal side and created a spark, and the whole thing blew up, and it shoved this metal rod up through his face, through his brain. But ultimately, he survived. He lost an eye. I mean, he was still messed up. But what happened to him later was he couldn't keep a job. He had trouble keeping friends. He was super vulgar. Like, he had zero filter. Everything that came into his brain just came out. It was, usually inappropriate. So they've actually recreated digitally his head, his skull, his brain, the wound, and the parts of the brain that we understand to be kind of the filtration system to keep us from saying all the horrible things that pop into it, had a metal rod shoved through it.
Hey, it's just editing me here. The guy's name was Phineas Gage, and it was in September of 1848.
So the brain is increasingly evidenced as being what makes us who we are. Now, the problem, right? The difficulty here is, well, then, am I doing anything? Do I, where do we go from? Where do we take this information? Where do we existentially take this concept? And I got to tell you, my brain's having trouble running these circles, trying to figure out kind of what to. Wow. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. Sure. I had to brake hard, and then the truck broke way harder. Almost got hit by the truck behind me. Detected a vehicle in front of me, and it got super excited about that. I'm glad I got my brakes replaced. I hate this town some days. This is one of those days. We give everybody in front of me a lot more space, because this is not how I wanted my day to go. What's that car again? Yeah, that makes sense. That makes total sense.
Hey, it's editing me again. Just wanted to clarify that I was driving safely, but there was a couple of vehicles up ahead of me that stopped short, which stopped the truck in front of me, which stopped me, which stopped the truck behind me. It was all It was all a bit unnecessary. That's all.
All right, so where do we go from here, right? What do we do with this information? Like I said, I still suspect that most people, even after hearing this stuff, they're going to be like, what is the point? I don't mean what's the point of the research? What do we do with that? Because we still have to get up every day. We still have to put food on the table, right? We still have to do our jobs. We still have to wash our clothes. We still have to do all of this stuff that we have to do. So this question of, is it my brain or is it me? Am I my brain? Am I not my brain? Am I a soul steering the brain? And these are things that I find interesting, that I think most people would not. I mean, they'd find it, compelling maybe, but they wouldn't think about it for days at a time, let alone keep coming back to the subject. And that's why you have me, so I can do that for you. I'm like a diabetic shaman with high blood pressure, right? I'm definitely not the guy you want traveling the underworld with you, but I may know the way. So yeah, what to do with this, right? So if we're not so there's definitely temptation if we're not in control. If it's because it's our brain, we do run the risk of, the devil made me do it, right? Oh, it's just my brain. Like it's not me. And our brains are affected by everything around us. We know from prisoners, right? Isolation is a real problem with the human mind, right? We are social animals. Now, I'm an introvert and I'm a homebody, and I don't have a problem not physically being around people a whole bunch. It's not to say I don't like being around people, especially my people, but there we go. It's not to say I hate people in their entirety. I mean, people frustrate me, and I think there's too many of us sometimes. But all in all, I still need some social interaction. To have none, people go insane. People who are in solitary, especially for a long period of time, they are not okay. They are definitely not okay. And then you look at people who've had, you look at the Unabomber, right? He went through the MK Ultra program. Didn't even think that was him. His brain got messed with severely, intensely, and intently. He was not okay. The brain adapts, it reacts, it makes calculations, it processes information. It does all these things for us. It does a lot of things that we, are unconscious of, right? I mean, it's as far as like free will, as far as absolute abject free will, if we just take the term free will in and of itself, if we were forced to consciously do all the things that our body requires it to do, we'd all be on the floor, regulating our blood, breathing, moving muscles around. The amount of effort involved to consciously perform all the tasks of our physical body would be impossible. So our subconscious brain does it for us, right? We're checked out on all this stuff. And, can you imagine? We have to sleep, right? How do we keep breathing while we're asleep? How do we consciously force our bodies to keep breathing when we're unconscious? It's fascinating to me. Now, as I said at some point earlier about not punishing people for their crimes, I don't always agree with that. Like I appreciate the idea of being compassionate, being empathetic. I think that we do a lot of really harsh things to people who are just trying to survive and get through their day. And come on, go. And I don't believe that everything requires the level of punishment. Who's literally kicking a can down the street? I don't think those are real thing anymore. I think that we do over arrest, over incarcerate people a lot of times, and it's weighted differently for different types of crime, especially in the U.S. Weighted for different types of crimes. What's nuts in the Philippines? Duterte was killing drug dealers, like killing them. You're dealing drugs. If you're caught doing drugs, you're in big trouble. I mean, just we have this belief that abstinence is the only solution to all kinds of things. Like, well, just don't do it. Well, it's not always that simple. I knowingly diabetic, knowingly all the things wrong with me, continue to, you know, make poor choices about my eating and my drinking. And frankly, I'm still not making the best choices about my eating. I'm slightly better, but there are still things that I have to work on. And, you know, you have to want to work on them. And that's, again, that's the other thing that concerns me. And I haven't fully fleshed out in the reading anyway about, you know, it's our brain. Our brain is just reacting to things. Our brain is biological intelligence, right? If you think about artificial intelligence and the whole thing about learning and adapting, right? Our brains are the same thing, basically. It's just meat and water. Slightly more complicated, but very generically. And it has to do all of these things on top of everything else it's doing. So, yeah, we will consciously make decisions, right? Maybe that's our free will at a real generic sense, right? At a real lower level. So you can, I'm sorry. So, am I losing my train of thought? Did I get hip on my train of thought? So as far as punishment goes, I still unfortunately disagree with the concept that just because their brain is in such a state that they perform the given crime, I still believe that there are certain crimes that should be punishable, currently at least, punishable by ending that existence, because they are clearly a danger, and odds seem to be in the favor of, if they've done it once, they're going to do it again, or we've caught them for one. However, how many have they actually committed? And I think that that's also another topic of discussion, one that I definitely need to get more into. You know, the means of state-sponsored murder are very problematic, and they have not improved. Frankly, I still think the guillotine is probably the best solution, but it still may not be. Especially if we're talking about the brain. I mean, can you imagine if you get your head cut off and your brain's still like, what the fuck? That would be a terrible way to go. So I've got some thinking to do on that, but I also think that it should be for pretty extreme cases. But I do believe that taking certain beings off the street is still smart. I think some incarceration is still good. I think that it is possible for at least some of these people to become readjusted to society, to rehabilitate. Now, the prison system in the U.S. is very capitalistic and isn't built around the idea of rehabilitation. There are definitely other prison systems around the world which are pretty similar in the sense that they just put people in it, and that's it. Right now they're there. And Mild Man used to be a prison guard in a couple of different states, and he has a very black and white take. I'm sorry, black and white is the wrong. I think it's a more extreme take than I have on punishment, on incarceration, on prisoners. Certainly, in certain respects, there are certain crimes. I think certain crimes are. That's a larger topic to kind of break all that down and really out of the scope of this one. And that's why I'm slower, because I'm distracted by those thoughts. And normally I would go down those roads, but I'm trying not to purposely. This is how that looks when you didn't plan anything out. So, I'm sorry, back to the matter at hand, right? Back to the whole concept of who's in charge. And I don't know, right? The split brain thing is a real problem for me to try to cobble together something with any kind of cohesion, because you're still the person, right? You're still a representative of the two brains, and the two brains aren't necessarily two different persons. They're just processing different bits of information at the same time, and they're unable to communicate with each other. Is there a separate kind of mental duality of man? I'm thinking a generic explanation without getting. I don't know how much more deep I can get into this, but a generic explanation that I have been thinking about it has been this idea of we're still the sum of our parts, right? So even though you have the one half the brain and the other half the brain we're still the whole body. We're still the whole physical being. So there's still some culpability in that respect. Can I park there? No. Can I pause this? Sorry, this is a little more rambly than I anticipated. We're still the sum of our parts, right? We are head to toe who we are. And even if things get, replaced, lose limbs, we're still that entity, right? We're not the ship of Theseus problem. We are still who we are. And we are all of those things. We are collectively all of those things, right? Or we're all quite literally nothing. And I don't take the full nihilistic approach that we're literally nothing. I mean, I think on a universal scale we're largely irrelevant, but that's a different context. But I'm still me. I think there's still merit to that idea that I still have to get up. I still have to deal with this wound that I've got in my body. I still have to try to eat better. I need to exercise more. I got to take better care of myself. I got to keep working. I mean, there's all these things that we are responsible for that keep us from these kinds of questions. And it's not that the question isn't important or relevant, but is it? Maybe we're just the whole story of this entity that makes us what we are, right? We're not just the brain and the body. We're all of it. We're the whole thing, for better or worse. We have our corpus callosum separated, and now I can draw poorly with both hands simultaneously rather than just the one. I mean, the question of who's in charge is largely relevant around responsibility, right? Who's culpable for the decisions that we've made? How do we get to where we are? I mean, I think that we are responsible for. I mean, the thing happened. We did the thing. If we base it more on the level of the thing, that's kind of what we're doing now. Oh, this is actually a lot more complicated than I thought. I thought I had something to work with, and the more I talk about it, the worse it gets. And that's the other thing that's fun about the brain. I don't know if other people experience this or notice this, but I was thinking about this for a while, and I thought it made sense. I thought I had at least something to work with, right? Something to talk about to bring to the table here. But now that I'm going through it and hearing it out loud, it sounds so much worse, so much more complicated. But it goes back to the question of, well, maybe it doesn't, right? Maybe the question of doesn't matter isn't relevant. I mean, it's not on a day-to-day basis, but on a larger sense of what makes a person, that existential, that philosophical, those level of questions difficult. They're difficult to fathom. They're difficult to just easily come up with a response to that. And I think that's why there's such a need in humanity for something that is a religion. Something that is, I mean, not just an ideology, but it's got to be an ideology that's based on some sort of universal truth or guarantee, right? I mean, just wanting to be good is good. I mean, for me, that's plenty. But to feel like you have assurances that being good will mean something to somebody down the road, it's a little much. I mean, it definitely fits into the parental concept, right? We're raised largely to react to what our parents react to, right? How our parents react to things. We're largely raised to be as much of the person that they want us to be as possible, and sometimes that backfires on them, and sometimes it works out. But we're always answering to somebody until we get old enough to get out on our own, and we don't answer to anybody except laws and jobs and doctors. So we I did not expect to be lost. I usually have some kind of ending or something, but I don't know that I have one right now. I'm gonna have to really ponder this, especially the split brain thing. I mean, honestly, that's the fascinating part for me. But it's really just a complication of the brain not talking to the brain, not communicating with itself, being able to communicate with itself. Are we even? And that's the other thing, right? Are we even I, or is it we? We are Legion. We are Venom. I mean, is that what we're having to think about and talk about from a neuroscientific standpoint? I don't know. I guess I don't have an answer or something to work with. I really thought I did. It's really going to irritate me a little bit. If you guys have any ideas, I'm definitely interested. I do think it's a fascinating topic. I think there's a lot that I have to keep reading about to be able to bring more kind of understanding to the table. I definitely want to side with empathy over punishment for punishment's sake. And I think, someone being at fault, something being an accident, I mean, these are things that are require discussion, I think, in each situation. Right? I don't think it's quite as cut and dry. But I think we can't necessarily always just blame the brain because a thing happened. But in general, I mean, even in our day-to-day lives, it's not who's pulling the strings. It's just are the strings being pulled, right? Are the things being done that need to be done? I mean, that's utilitarian, but we have things to do. Right? I mean, we need. I mean, we just look at our needs. Right? We need to eat. We need to drink. We need to sleep. Right? All those things being done. Okay, who's doing that? Maybe it is a drunk little alien somewhere in the brain going, "What the hell?" All right. Well, I didn't expect to leave myself stuck with a lot to think about. The idea is to leave you guys with stuff to think about, and me to be like, "All right, next topic." I'm stumped. I'm stumped. Oh, it's going to be quite an editing job. All right. Well, as always, brush your teeth. It's good for your health. It's good for your smile. It's good for your health. Try to eat better. Eat a little better. Have a great time after whatever time you're listening to this is. Yeah, that makes sense.